In the past few years, we've heard the term free agents and been told we would all need to become one in order to succeed. The recent economic structures have helped to promote this concept as reality. Where do we get the tools to take control of our career path in the present and future? Welcome to the Career Confidant with your host, Marie Zimenoff. Marie and her guest experts are here to provide you with the tools you need to move forward and achieve your career goals. Now, here is Marie Zimenoff.
Hello and welcome to the Career Confidant. And today we are going to be talking about some things that will help you prepare for your career in the future, which is what we're all here for, because we're going to talk about trends that are coming up in 2025, what you can expect, and what it will mean for your career. So stick with us. Today we're going to talk about at least five trends that are coming up in the career space. So job search, what's going on in hiring, as well as what's going on in the world of work and what they mean for your career. Now, you know that we're here on the Career Confidant Radio to share the information and resources that you need to take control of your own career. And we are supported by Career Thought Leaders and Resume Writing Academy, who offer training for career services providers, as well as resources for job seekers when they're looking to hire individuals that offer those services, or just looking for free resources for their job search and resume. Now, you'll find us on YouTube. We go live on YouTube every Tuesday to talk about a topic that is happening in the world and what we need to stay on top of our careers. So check out the Career Thought Leaders YouTube channel. Okay, so what's going on in terms of trends? Every year, Career Thought Leaders does a trends report that we do an event centered around trends, looking at what's coming up and what do we need to be aware of. And for the last few years, no surprise that AI or other technologies have been on that list, both in terms of how they impact job search, as well as how they impact hiring and how people in hiring space, recruiters, those types of folks are using technology, not just AI, but much beyond that, to improve their searches, to find the best people to fit their role. And we've seen an interesting movement in this space over the last year where there have been for a while systems that allow you to automate your job application process. So there are some that will track things for you. There are some that will help you fill in applications online. And then there are some that will just flat out apply to jobs for you on automated. You just hit a button and it will apply to jobs for you that it finds align with your search results. And it kind of takes you out of the equation once you get there. So these technologies have created an increase of applications per open job that is alarming in some ways for hiring managers. We've seen 100%, 200, 300% increase in online applications in some industries for some types of jobs because of these technologies. So we have this idea of, we don't want it to be challenging for our applications to get seen. But then what happens in this space is that now there's just so many applications coming in. We've got to figure out how do recruiters, how do hiring managers get through those. So if you've ever used one of those technologies, I'd love to hear about it. Share a note with me. You can always reach out to me at marie@careerthoughtleaders.com, or you can follow me on LinkedIn, connect, send a message that way. Because this is one of those things where we'd love to hear from real job seekers. What are you doing? What are you seeing out there with these technologies? And are they really working for you? We read articles on the popular news and it will say that someone's used it, but you don't always know if that's really happening. And our team has tested some of those tools and found them to not always do what they say they will do. So I'd be careful with that. If you're using one of those, I would use it on the non-fully automated setting first so that you can check it. You can see what it's doing and say yes or no to apply to those jobs. These are technologies like Lazy Apply, Easy Apply, Loop CV in the European space has been around for quite a while, and Massive. There's a bunch of them popping up that will do these automated applications. So just be aware that those are around and be careful in terms of using them to make sure they're really aligning with what you want to do. Now, it's interesting because, as a career services provider, sometimes it's easy to just say, oh, that's a really bad idea. And it's definitely something to be cautious about. I can see that if you're in a really specific career space where positions are very targeted, that it might be a good fit. So, certain types of engineering or whatever, where it's very clear cut that this is the job and this is what you're doing, I could see those being very valuable in something like that space. When you're in a more generic space like administrative assistants or salespeople, you'd have to be careful with some of those, because are they going to be nuanced enough to apply to jobs where you're really a good fit? How are they screening the places where they're applying? I have always found job alerts to not be that great at actually sending me what I want, what I'm looking for. And if I've got a less defined goal, that's even more true. If I've got a really specific job target, then it is better, right? So those are just things to think about. If you want to use some of those types of systems as a job seeker, know that those are things to watch out for. Another thing to watch out for if you're in that space and you're thinking about using those technologies is that you want to be really careful of AI writing your documents. That writes everything the same. Everybody sounds the same. It's really easy for hiring managers to see through that. And, you might say, well, they're using AI. Why can't I use AI? It's not that you can't use it. We just can't feel like your resume isn't you. So you can use it to help you in the process, but you don't want to use it to the point where the resume is very obvious that it was generated with those tools, because then we start to question, are you really you? Are these things the really things you've done? And I don't want to hire somebody that hasn't done what I need them to do. So if I am curious about it being developed with AI, it's not that I don't want you to use those tools, but it is that I want to make sure it's actually your experience coming through in that document, not the experience of the AI system's generated text, right? So that's on the job seeking side. I love the tools like Teal, and there's some others, Hunter, there's two Hunters. There's one that's a sales research tool, and there's one that's a job search Chrome extension. And those are great because they help you keep organized and know what you're doing and track what you're applying to, those types of things. So that is helpful. You just want to be careful with the things that are real automated, and how much input are you giving and how much are you making sure that you know where you're going and what you're doing. So those are some things to watch out for there. On the hiring side, the AI has been used in the hiring process for a while, long before ChatGPT. And there were systems that would either plug into an applicant tracking system and would help bring in outside information. We started talking about these a long time ago, things like Araya, where it would go out and create a profile of the person from the internet, in addition to add to what they applied in their resume, so that it would build a more complete picture of the candidate for the hiring manager. And of course, applicant tracking systems have been using AI. And it's always important to realize that an applicant tracking system is a storage thing. It's a storage system. Some of them score documents. Some of them rate documents. We recently had an update from one of our recruiters that about 15% of them automatically reject people, but that's going to be determined on the individual company's way that they've set it up. And most of the time, those automatic rejections happen because of a question you've answered, not because of something on your resume or a lack of something on your resume. Those are much more nuanced. So, for instance, if the application asks, are you a citizen? And to be employed by that company, you have to be a citizen of the country where the headquarters is. If you answer no to that question, you're going to be eliminated. And that's mostly what is being done when they're using automated rejection, is answers to specific questions like that, where they're asking you the question and your answer to it has to be a certain type of answer for it to go through the system. Very rarely is a company going to reject applications because they didn't score a certain score against the job requirements. More often than not, that is creating a ranking, and then the recruiter is going through those who rank. And of course, those who rank less are going to get less eyeball time, but it doesn't mean they're getting zero and the system is automatically eliminating them. So that's an important thing to recognize when we're talking about use of technology in recruiting, is that it's not, most companies are not using that to score and automatically eliminate candidates. One, because it's just not that good yet, and we know it's not. So I can get better results and I can put in good questions that it might be harder for an automated application system to answer, those types of things, so that I'm not getting so many automated applications, but I'm also not getting rid of people that would be a good fit, right? Nobody wants to get rid of applicants that might be a good fit. So one of the other amazing things that companies are doing is using this technology to try to go out and find candidates who would be a good fit for their positions. And these are systems like Seek Out, Araya does this as well. There's features in some of the big applicant tracking systems like iCIMS and JobVite. And then one of our new favorites, they had their team come and share their technology with us recently, is Findem. And Findem, we've been paying attention to them since 2019, 2020. And they go out, you build a profile as a recruiter, say, I'm looking for someone with this type of experience, maybe even this type of training or whatever. And the system will go out and it will find those people based on keyword matches. But since we're talking AI, it could be a lot more intricate than that. And I'm getting people who match my description of what I'm looking for. It's building a profile for them. And of course, now I've got all these things where it can help me reach out to them and manage the conversation. And this helps me get outside of the box. So the whole point of it is to get outside of my regular recruiting rut to hopefully diversify my applicant pool. People from different countries, from rural versus just urban. You think of that recruiters going to the same universities or same type of places over and over again. And now this system can get them outside of that and really get them into other places where they might be able to engage with hiring people that fit the mold, even though they don't end up in the hiring pool historically for that company. So we're going to take a short break. When we come back, we'll talk a little bit more about how Findem finds people and what that means for you if you're a job seeker, or for your clients if you're a career services provider. Just a reminder, and our Career Thought Leaders Symposium is coming up. And if you head to careerthoughtleaders.com/symposium, you will find all the details on that and be able to get in and come and get together with our group of thought leaders and hear what is the latest and greatest in this space. All right, we will be back in just a few minutes and keep talking about how recruiters are using technology to better find candidates. We'll be right back in just a few minutes.
Follow Voice America at facebook.com/Voice America for juicy updates from your favorite radio shows and podcasts.
You know that the career landscape has changed and that you need to be proactive about managing your career. You can have the foresight, skills, and confidence you need to take charge of your career and seize opportunities. A strategic advantage and career expert, Marie Zimenoff has helped thousands of leaders like you get focused, get found, and get hired. Visit getcareersmart.com to find out more. That's getcareersmart.com or call 800-521-2080 to schedule your complimentary consultation.
Voice America programs are now available on your favorite connected device, including Amazon, Alexa, and Google Home. Through streams with Apple Podcasts, TuneIn, and iHeartRadio, listening to your favorite show is as easy as saying the show name followed by the word podcast.
Hey, Alexa, play Finding Your Frequency podcast.
If that doesn't work, try adding on TuneIn or on iHeartRadio or on Apple Podcasts.
When it comes to business, you'll find the experts here. Voice America Business Network.
You are tuned in to the Career Confidant with Marie Zimenoff. If you have a question or comment for Marie or her guest today, please send an email to marie@strategicadvantage.com. Now, back to the Career Confidant.
Welcome back to the Career Confidant, and today we're talking about some of the trends in hiring and job search and careers and what that means for you. And so we've been talking about technology and its impact on job search, specifically how we're seeing an extreme increase in job applications per open position. And then what does that mean for our job seekers and some of the technologies they're using that might be helpful. So we were talking about how our job seekers are using more job search AI, and that's causing hiring managers to try to figure out how to make sure they get to see the best candidates that they want to see. And that is just causing, it's an interesting shift in the job market of this proactive, I'm going to go out and find people that fit my job target, that fit my requirements. So they're using these systems. They're going out there and they're plugging in some kind of criteria. And, these are the types of titles we're looking for. And then they're finding people on the internet beyond LinkedIn because, right, LinkedIn as a recruiter, I have to pay for a LinkedIn seat, and that lets me search LinkedIn, but nothing else. And so a lot of these technologies have come around and they've said, hey, now instead of just searching LinkedIn, where you're dependent on a candidate having put things into their profile to be able to find them in search results, now we can do this where it searches the web. And if someone is presenting at conferences or they're writing papers or they're, guesting on podcasts or whatever it might be, they're found in all of those different ways on these systems that look at the internet and instead of just looking at one platform. So these systems allow recruiters to do that, to source people on the internet. So one of the other things that this trend in technology is causing is actually an anti-technology trend where we're looking at recruiters using more community building. Now, sometimes they're doing this through an online platform. So this doesn't mean that they're not using technology to do it, but it's not about searching or matching or any of that. It's about creating a space, a community where I can build a pipeline, right? Where I can build a community that's going to be able to refer people to me, or where I might reach out and say, hey, I'm hiring for this. And automatically there's people in that online space, in that community that are already qualified for those jobs. So it feels like such an old school thing, but it really wasn't that long ago that recruiters would start meetup groups, or they'd do something where they could build that community and get to know people and have people get to know them, right? Using offline things like a meetup group. And we're seeing some of those things come back. Now, you also have all of these online opportunities. Maybe I'm going to start a Facebook group. Maybe I'm going to start a Slack channel. Maybe I'm going to start a Discord group where I can get industry professionals together, let them network, and then also have this place where I can recruit from. And we're talking to people, or hearing from hiring managers that it's kind of going back to analog, right? Because the technology has gotten in the way. How can I go back and focus on building those relationships that are really going to give me the pipeline that I need? And I think this is interesting because we're seeing it happen in recruiting. And we may very well see it happen soon in interviewing. There's some new systems out there that will allow a candidate to have a co-pilot when you're interviewing. Although I don't know that I'd call it a co-pilot because it seems like it's doing a little bit too much of the driving, but you can have it open. And when a recruiter asks you a question on a Zoom call, it would come up with the answer for you. So think, ChatGPT is sitting over there on your screen and the recruiter asks a question, ChatGPT is listening, and as soon as the question is asked, it starts generating an answer. This is obvious. I would hope it would be obvious that it's obvious. If you're reading from a screen and you're waiting for something to generate an answer for you before you answer, it is obvious. Please don't do it. Those tools should be used for practicing, for mock interviews, not for live interview use. You want to be present with the person you're interviewing with. You want to be paying attention to them. You want to have your stories prepared so that you can share those stories while still having your focus on the person or people on the other side of the screen. So that's coming, and recruiters know it. So they are trying to figure out, what do we do, right? Do we go back to more in-person interviews? Do we go back to doing something else where we're more likely to get the authentic connection with that interviewee? And it'll be interesting to see what happens if you're a career services provider, job seeker, and you're seeing any of these shifts, or you've tried any of these technologies. Let us know. We'd love to hear that. And again, if you haven't tried them, I would just be careful. I would use it for practice, not for a live interview. It's probably just not going to be your best foot forward. Really, an interview is less about, it is about your answers, but it's maybe 60% about the connection with you, 70% about the connection. The answers matter, but we already know that you're qualified or we wouldn't have brought you in. So the answers matter more in terms of that connection and how you think through things than in a specific example that you might give. So be thinking about that as you prepare for these types of things. All right, so that's a lot on the technology side, but it's a big piece of what's going on right now in the market is just all of the technological disruption on both the job search side as well as the hiring side. So one of the things that I've heard a lot about in the last 18 months or so is this decrease in middle level jobs. So we're seeing companies kind of eliminate some of those roles, try to streamline their middle management levels. And of course, in the technology space, seeing some of that middle management move away, as well as some of the entry level kind of coding and stuff. And so we've seen people on the job market that haven't been on the job market before. And this trend, about a year ago, the conversation started around white collar job loss. So what does it look like when people who are mid-level, good professional types of jobs, what does it look like when we start to see those jobs decline? Although I'd put a little bit of an asterisk on there. I don't know that they're necessarily declining, they're just shifting. And how do we manage that? And so we were doing some interesting conversation around this in our Career Jam session and talking about what industries are growing, where are we seeing some growth that people might tap into, which I'll go through here in just a minute, but also thinking about what industries are doing well and what types of roles might be doing well that we don't always think about. And so in the middle of this conversation, my colleagues went into some breakout rooms and I sat and did a little bit of research on what are some of the other types of jobs that we might not think about that are growing. And I call them blue collar jobs. But this whole idea of blue collar is just shifting so much right now because there are a lot of jobs that aren't necessarily what you would traditionally call white collar, but they aren't necessarily that blue collar traditional job either, because that has shifted, right? We're just not seeing And I mean, even these blue collar jobs use a lot of technology. They're not your traditional, like, dirty job. So I'm going to run through some of these. I just think it's interesting to think about different ways that things are growing and what might this mean for your career, for your jobs, even if you don't do this specific role. What might that mean for you? Types of opportunities, types of openings. So robotics is a growth area where you've got robotics technicians, you've got people who are working on them, and then all of the surrounding professions that would be involved in these types of companies. Here in the US, you're looking at big companies like ABB, Boston Dynamics. So you might think about that in your area. What are the robotics types of companies? How are they doing? What types of roles might be available for your type of work there, even if you don't want to go back and retrain to be a robotics technician, which maybe you do, could be an option. And it does just require an associate's degree in some fields to be that robotics technicians. It's very similar when we look at some of the other related things in terms of like wind turbines, solar installations. So you might think, oh, I don't want to do that, but who is supporting those people? What types of businesses are doing that? And how might you plug in there? Now, just a little interesting aside, because green careers were one of our topics in this conversation as well, is that one of the largest green providers in the U.S. Is actually a non-U.S. company named Vestas, makes windmills, and they're hiring like crazy here in the U.S., giving a lot of opportunity. And of course, wind, 44% predictive growth for wind turbine technicians. And when you look at that, you might say, well, I don't want to be a wind turbine technician, Marie. And that's great. So what might that mean that it opens up for you? What are the related careers? What are the related things that might be something that would be a good fit for you? That's what you're looking at. We're not looking at just this one specific job that it might come up as to this is growing. We're looking at a little bit bigger picture whenever we talk about these things. Very similar with solar, 52% growth in the next 10 years for solar installation. And what might that look like, and how could you get trained to do that? Because that doesn't require any kind of degree in many cases right now. Now, one of the things that I think is fun, and it's growing now, we'll see what happens with the changeover in leadership in the U.S. and how that impacts us even more. But we're seeing a lot of increase in homemade things, handmade things. They call them the artisan trades. And there's a huge world of things supporting this. So if you've seen it, and I tend to pay attention to advertising or marketing, the new commercials from Etsy on how buying things that are made by homemade small producers is different, right? You get a different quality. And so we're just looking at this transition. So we're going to take a quick break. And when we come back, we'll go through a few other more career types that are growing. And then we'll talk about some other trends that are happening to round out our year looking forward to 2025. So we'll be right back in just a few minutes.
Voice America is on LinkedIn. Connect with us today.
You know that the career landscape has changed and that you need to be proactive about managing your career. You can have the foresight, skills, and confidence you need to take charge of your career and seize opportunities. A strategic advantage and career expert, Marie Zimenoff has helped thousands of leaders like you get focused, get found, and get hired. Visit getcareersmart.com to find out more. That's getcareersmart.com or call 800-521-2080 to schedule your complimentary consultation.
Have you become a member yet? Sign up now to become a member of Voice America. It's always free and easy. Plus, you get to take advantage of some great member benefits. Get unlimited access to millions of hours of on-demand content across all of our channels. Keep track of your favorite episodes, shows, and hosts in your own customizable library. Find out what shows you might be interested in based on your favorites. Plus, you get insider access with our newsletter. Membership gives you more. Sign up at voiceamerica.com and click register at the top right.
When it comes to business, you'll find the experts here. Voice America Business Network.
are tuned in to the Career Confidant with Marie Zimenoff. If you have a question or comment for Marie or her guest today, please send an email to marie@strategicadvantage.com. Now, back to the Career Confidant.
Welcome back to the Career Confidant. Today we're talking about some trends in careers and what we're looking forward to for 2025. So we've been talking about AI and how that's coming into job search and hiring. And then we shifted into talking about this change in middle management, white collar types of jobs, where we're seeing perhaps a decrease there. And I would say that it hasn't been going on long enough to say this is a definite trend. It's just something we're watching. So it's been being talked about for about 18 months, but I've seen the conversations about it go up and down. So I'd say about 6 months ago, there was an article that said it wasn't happening anymore. Now we're seeing it again. So we just more time. We need more time to tell. But if you or job seekers you're working with are in this space and they need a job and they are looking for something that may have larger growth than the potential middle management job that they're at right now, we've been talking about some other areas for them to consider. Remembering that these aren't things where they necessarily have to go get the hands-on jobs that are being listed here, but thinking about how their skills might transfer into these types of companies in a role that is still viable. Might be marketing, sales, right? Things that aren't in the same middle management precarious position that they're just getting out of. So we were talking about the makers and the artisan trades, the manufacturing, machinist, 3D printing. And so a lot of companies have gone to using that for their prototypes, and we need people that can do that. And then most of those are small companies, small to medium-sized businesses where they might have a 3D printing specialist for their company. That's what the company is, just like there used to be contract manufacturing. We're seeing now some of these things pop up where it's contract 3D printing. It's very similar, right? And those companies need people to help them grow. So they might even be open to more of that kind of middle management type of position because they need that as they grow. And so those would be interesting things to look at. Then we get into the transportation space, drone operators, fleet managers, as we get into, the self-driving cars a little ways off here in the US at least, but we still need people to manage how we move things around the country, how we get things from place to place, and of course drones coming in to do some of that, and how will we help those technologies get integrated into our daily life. So those are just some interesting things to think about if you or your client is looking at the types of jobs they've always done and thinking, maybe this isn't the rosiest of pictures moving forward. Where could I transition? There are some ideas for you. Just think outside of the box. Think about some of those industries that are growing, and how could your client plug in their skills in a way that will add value and maybe add value a little bit longer term. So when I think about those trends and really where people are going, it's causing a huge generational conversation again. And I think this is a good thing. It makes me happy that we're talking about generations again, because it just gets us thinking about each other and how we're different. It's good to think about how we're the same too, and how we might communicate better with each other. And the generational conversation, it can be a good inclusive way to have that conversation if you don't get too stuck on each overviews, the overgeneralizations of each generation. There you go. What a sentence. Now we have Gen Alpha coming up in the early, they're in their early teens. So what does that look like when they start coming into the workplace as those first jobs? You have Gen Z, who is almost all out into the workforce now. And then, of course, we've got millennials, X, boomer, probably not too many great generation folks hanging out, but maybe a few. So you could potentially have all of those generations in your workplace. And there are a lot of differences. I mean, you look from boomers to Gen Z, that's a big time span. There's a lot of things that have changed. There's a lot of things that have just adjusted in terms of how we work. And for your boomers, they've had to learn how to do it all, right? They've had to learn through all of the trends. And your Gen Z coming in with a native in some of these technologies, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they know how to put them to work. And what does that look like? So, how we have these generational conversations, how we understand what each generation is looking for from work, and how we understand the ways that we're all the same. I was telling a story the other day, and someone said, "Oh, that's such a millennial perspective." And I was like, well, actually, that person was probably a boomer that I was working with, because we all want to have meaning at work. I mean, that's been a cultural shift. I don't think that's a generational thing anymore. Maybe when millennials were first coming into the workplace, that was kind of a millennial thing. But now every single client I talk to of any age has pretty much the same overarching, underlying, whatever you want to call it, that they want to feel like their work is worth their time, not just in terms of money, but in terms of adding to something related to their values, whether that's community impact or world impact or environment or whatever it might be. We're all looking for work that aligns a little better with those values. And that can be a fun generational conversation to have. So I think we're going to see more conversations around this, which again, I think is a positive, because it just gets us talking to each other, learning about each other, opening our eyes to each other's ways of thinking. And it's a much more productive and positive conversation than some of the other us-them conversations that we might be having, hopefully mostly outside the workplace. But it's one of the big impacts that we saw for this year was the election, and how the election impacts people's relationships and productivity at work. And now that we've got that settled, and we're going to have all the remaining conversations around it, but I love the generational conversation as just a way to bring your workplace together, have people get to know each other a little bit better, and learn about them. What does align for that person with some of the generational stuff, and what doesn't. And we're just going to see that more and more generational conversations, people staying in the workplace longer. And you definitely will have a significant amount of boomers still in the workplace when Gen Alpha comes in. And what will that look like? How will leaders be able to help those organizations have those important conversations? So that's one of our other trends. And Gen Z, what's happening with them in education and at work. And of course, our boomers staying into the workforce for much more than people of their age did in the past. And Gen Z struggling a little bit to find jobs because of that, struggling to find some of those real jobs, that they've come into the workplace to do. How do we get them transitioned into the jobs that they want to do, while some of the older generations are also staying in the workplace? We've kind of deemed that the gray, they used to call it the blue tsunami. We call it blue ceiling, that it's creating a little bit of pressure on the workplace. But we're going to see that shift as the workplace shifts. So we'll keep an eye on that. Okay, that kind of plays into this conversation that you probably are reading about quite frequently if you pay attention to Forbes or Entrepreneur or any kind of those articles. We're talking a lot about burnout, mental health at work types of topics. And this is one of those areas where everybody has their own words for it. And it's important as a leader, as a supervisor, as a provider of career services or other types of services in a company, learning and development, that we're just thoughtful about the language that we use and how we bring in this conversation. Mental health is definitely a more, palatable conversation than it ever has been before, which is, amazing that people feel like they can talk about it and have conversations about it. But as a service provider, I'm still always aware of how I'm bringing it up and using words maybe more like burnout and things that people are talking about to bring it into the conversation so that people don't feel like we're getting too deep into a counseling conversation with, too fast. Not too deep, too fast. And so those are some of the conversations that we had around how people can manage their work-life balance a little bit better, what that looks like, and how we have these conversations as leaders or as supervisors, service providers, just to open up that conversation and make sure that we're opening it up, right? That we're giving people the opportunity to share with that how they're doing. There's been research showing that people are more likely to have these conversations if you open the door. That also means as a leader, you've got to be ready for it. So actually, in just a few weeks, we'll have Beth Bonatti Kennedy, who just released her second book on the topic of resilience, because it's a great way to have this conversation in the workplace and just understand how leaders can make sure their teams have resources for these topics and are seeing that it's okay to bring these topics into the workplace. All right. So then the last one we're going to get to after we take a little short break here is global politics and economics. So you really can't talk about the workplace without looking at what's going on in the world, from war in Ukraine and Palestine, and thinking about what that means for all of us, for jobs. Of course, the political changes that we've seen and that we will see here, especially in the US with the new change in leadership. What does that mean for jobs, and how can we help people get ready for those changes without getting too carried away, but, making too many assumptions or getting paralyzed by all of the uncertainty? And, we've been talking about VUCA, volatile, uncertain, that those types of things have been happening in the world for decades. And it's just gotten faster and faster and a little bit more intense and more intense. And so how can we help people get grounded and do what they need to do while they're informed, but not alarmed, right? How can we be informed, but not alarmed, especially when it comes to career things? We might need to be alarmed about other things, but when it comes to career things, how can we make these decisions with a clear head? Because things shift. They do change and they shift. And sometimes it looks like it's going to happen really fast, but then it doesn't. So we might make a big change and it doesn't really work out for us. We didn't maybe have all the information, but we can't always have all the information. So this is that fine line that we walk when we think about career decisions, career projections, and all of those things. So we're going to take a short break, and when we come back, we're going to look at some kind of longer term data, some big picture themes that can help you prepare to be employable next year and the year after that, and as long as you want to be. So we'll take a little break and we'll be right back here on the Career Confidant.
Voice America is on your favorite smart speaker. If you have Alexa or Google Home, go ahead and give us a try.
Hey Alexa, play Finding Your Frequency podcast on TuneIn.
You know that the career landscape has changed and that you need to be proactive about managing your career. You can have the foresight, skills, and confidence you need to take charge of your career and seize opportunities. A strategic advantage and career expert, Marie Zimenoff has helped thousands of leaders like you get focused, get found, and get hired. Visit getcareersmart.com to find out more. That's getcareersmart.com or call 800-521-2080 to schedule your complimentary consultation.
A little birdie told me Voice America is on X. Follow us at Voice America TRN.
Are you a business owner, 1099 contractor, part-time employee, or volunteer who needs group health coverage you can actually afford? Do you know a nonprofit who would benefit from unlimited zero-cost funding? How about cost reduction, school safety, mental health wellness, and more? All these and more are fair game on Finding Certainty. If you want more certainty in your own life, you are not alone. Join us on the Voice America Business Channel. Find your own brand of certainty and realize your personal American dream with Finding Certainty, hosted by Patrick Lang. Let's unwrap the certainty experience together.
Voice America Business Network, the bottom line in business.
You are tuned in to the Career Confidant with Marie Zimenoff. If you have a question or comment for Marie or her guest today, please send an email to marie@strategicadvantage.com. Now, back to the Career Confidant.
Welcome back to the Career Confidant. And today we've been talking about trends in the workplace for 2025 and beyond. And we were just chatting about how the trends are hard, right, in career space. And we've been talking about a few for a really long time that had people panicking and now haven't really come to pass. So the blue tsunami was one of them, right? That we were going to have, or I don't know, gray tsunami. That's what it is. Gray tsunami, where everyone was going to retire and there weren't going to be anybody to do any of these jobs. And that hasn't happened. We saw an uptick of retirements during COVID. And then a lot of those people came back to work over the next 3 years. And if anything, like I said, we've seen more now of a gray ceiling where because people aren't retiring, it's harder in some industries for people to move up. Second thing was this idea that there wouldn't be anybody to do the work. Kind of the talent drain, right? There wasn't going to be any talent, or that there weren't going to be any jobs. We've kind of heard both of those thrown around, and it's interesting to see the panic that we might feel. And so what I've started doing is trying to look back a little further at predictions that were made so that as we look forward, we understand where we've been. So like I said, it must have been 2000s, maybe mid-2000s, where people started to talk about this gray tsunami. And so I've watched that. I've, heard about it, not seeing it happen, and looked at all the reasons why and the shifts that happened that people who made those early predictions couldn't have imagined. And we're still talking about it in some ways, and it may eventually happen because the younger generations, there just aren't as many of them numbers wise. But then you look at the technology shifts that have happened that can do some of the jobs, that maybe it won't matter that there are fewer people to do some of those jobs in some geographic areas. That does not apply to all geographic areas. But in Europe, the US, North America, and you are seeing a decrease in population. And that is going to be, perhaps there will be a lack of talent. However, the technology is making up for that. Then we look at predictions like the World Economic Forum. I like to look at their predictions because they're big picture, right? They're looking at the globe, not just at one specific area, which might have value for some other conversations, but it's good to see the big picture. And in 2020, they were looking at an increase in jobs over the next 4 years or whatever their time frame was. And then in 2023, they were looking at a decrease in jobs over the time frame of their prediction. So we see that things ebb and flow because we don't know. Is technology going to take jobs? Well, what I can tell you, when ChatGPT first came out, a lot of people said yes. And then it turned out it was kind of just taking the jobs that were already being taken by technology. And it isn't too hard for us to, common sense wise, think about what those are. Repetitive tasks, things that can be programmed, automated, bookkeeping, basic level accounting, coding. That one surprised a lot of people. But when we think about the big picture, you can see the trends and you can see what directions things might be going in general and take action to build your skills in the way that there might be growth. And then even if there is a slight change, you're already on the train, so it's easier to make a turn. It's one of my favorite things that Kimberly Spate, who's one of our instructors, she always says, you can't steer a parked car, right? So if you're already in continuous learning, continuous improvement, trying to anticipate and learn to stay aligned with what's coming, even if that shifts a little bit, you're already moving, and so you can shift with it. Versus if you're sitting there stuck, not knowing what to learn or what might be coming next, then you don't have any momentum when things do shift, and now you've got to start from zero. And you're probably less likely to hear about things shifting because you're not tuned in. So if I was going to give you maybe 2 tips here to be future proofed, it's to pay attention. What's going on in your industry or your desired industry? The best way to do this, and I don't just say this because I own one, it's professional associations or industry magazines, industry blogs, industry whatever they might have. Go to them. Pay attention. I find it easier to go to live events, virtual or in person, because if I buy something that's pre-recorded, I just am horrible at actually going in and listening to it. Unless the other thing I've done for myself is create an accountability partner. So maybe somebody else who is also going to watch it, or we can watch it together, or we can get together and talk about what we learned, those types of things. So learning, but directed learning. And the easiest way to get that direction is networking and listening in to some kind of industry group that gives you an opportunity to cull the noise just a little bit and see how it applies to your industry. The other thing would be finding a diverse swath of places that you can read that are relevant and not alarmist, if at all possible. So here I read the World Economic Forum. I like to read McKinsey, Deloitte. I mean, those are all workforce types of things, so it fits with mine. You're going to have to figure out what yours are. I actually like the Christian Science Monitor. It's a little bit right of center, but very data-based, kind of offsets things like Bloomberg, which tend to be a little bit left of center, but also, data-based. And just making sure that I have some diversity in those types of things. And then finding a group of individuals who hopefully can be somewhat similar, not all aligned with all of your ideologies, so that you get a little bit of diversity in your conversation, whether that's a regular conversation you're having on a platform like Discord or Slack or whatever, or a group that you get together with in person or virtually on a regular basis, where you're having an opportunity to hear what other people are seeing, hear what they're thinking, and learn from the things they're learning so that you don't have to do it all by yourself. So those things that I read, on a daily basis, the people that I engage with who are in kind of my inner circle, and those are all things that keep me balanced. Try to, get the different perspectives, as well as informed, but not alarmed. We need to pay attention to what's going on out there in the world, but a lot of that isn't informed. It isn't, and maybe even relevant to where you are or where you want to go. So find those things that are, and find people that can help you wade through that and figure out how you want to navigate it. We are happy to help you do that here on Career Confidant Radio. I'll be here on a regular basis. In fact, next week, our talent, our conversation, our topic for next week will be all around using AI in your career search. So from career exploration, job search, resumes, what are the best ways to use it where it has a positive impact, not a negative one. And that will be our conversation next week. So if you have any questions on that, you can always reach out to me at Marie, M-A-R-I-E, at careerthoughtleaders.com. And we'll see you right back here again next week on the Career Confidant.
Thank you for listening to the Career Confidant. Marie Zimenoff will return again with another terrific guest next Monday at 2 p.m. Eastern Time, 11 a.m. Pacific on the Voice America Business Channel. Be sure to join us then.